Well, the president is reportedly directing the Defense Department to come up with a few plans for reducing the U.S. nuclear arsenal by as much as 80%. The story was first reported by the Associated Press. Mr. Obama is hoping to encourage other nations to follow our example, so say the reports, and ultimately rid the world of nuclear weapons. But a recent editorial says the president is driven to reduce our nuclear weapons because of his aversion to America having superpower status. Quite a claim, and we have the author of that editorial, Frank Gaffney. He's the founder and president of the Center for Security Policy. So, Frank, you say this is more ideological than anything else. Tell us about why.
Since 1983, when he was a radical student in Columbia University, the president has had this aspiration that he's going to get rid of America's nuclear arsenal. I think it's sort of dressed up as a, hey, if we do it, everybody else will follow. There's simply no evidence that that's the case. And as 34 members of the House of Representatives noted in a letter to him, urging him to pull back from this folly, they said this is blind ideology at work. And I think they're exactly right. And you know what's really interesting about this is it's kind of a microcosm. It's a subset of what's happening to our national defense more generally. The president is engaged in a similarly blind, I think, ideologically driven effort to disarm this country. And a lot of it's been dressed up as budget discipline and reducing the deficit and so on. But I think really, as this example makes so clear, he's about cutting our capabilities to deter aggression, and in the process, I'm afraid, inviting more of it, in the interest of advancing what is a foolish, radical, and ultimately quite dangerous ideological agenda.
So two questions, one ideological and one when it comes to the policy itself. And the president's obviously not here to defend himself, and this is your opinion on how you think he places America in the world today. You know, it would benefit any president, President Obama or otherwise, to have a strong nation, a strong military, because quite frankly, you would think that it just makes the president's job easier. So why would the president want the opposite?
He came to office saying he was going to fundamentally transform the United States of America. And one of the places where I think the president has a lot of latitude to do that as commander-in-chief, especially in the kind of budget crisis we're in at the moment, economic difficulties and so on. And I think he's been relentlessly pushing forward on what really is a long-standing and quite radical desire to see the United States really basically like any other nation, not a great superpower, certainly not able to dictate to others what it thinks should be their policy, or for that matter, how the world should be run. And if you look at it through that prism, I think a lot of what is otherwise seemingly inexplicable, bowing to the Saudis and, resetting to the Russians, in which it's a one-way street, and ignoring the Chinese, building up what may be 3,000 nuclear weapons. He's talking about taking us down to 300.
Well,
this is the kind of thing most Americans wouldn't accept under any circumstances.
We've had some nuclear experts come on our show and explain some of the reason why they also believe that we should take our nuclear arsenal down. You mentioned the budget concerns, just that it's expensive to maintain and upkeep this massive arsenal that we have. And they also make the point that, listen, it's not that you need thousands of nuclear weapons to prove a point. I mean, that's what they say. That's why in some cases you have nonpartisan experts in the nuclear field say, you know, if we're looking to cut and we're looking to bring down where we're spending in defense, you know, the nuclear arsenal might be a place to look.
Yeah. Well, look, we've been cutting our nuclear arsenal for some time, and I appreciate Fair and Balanced allowing somebody who disagrees with this idea being on as well. The truth of the matter is we have an aging arsenal that I'm afraid is increasingly less and less capable of providing the kind of deterrence we need it to provide, a deterrence to aggression, a deterrence that protects our friends and allies around the world. And what was almost certainly going to come out of this is more nuclear weapons, because nobody else, as I say, is following the president's lead. And the more our deterrent becomes incredible, I think the more likely you're going to see countries looking at the Iranians and the North Koreans and the Russians and the Chinese and who knows who all else of a threatening kind, building up their arsenal, they're going to say, whether they're the Saudis, the Japanese, the Taiwanese, the South Koreans, perhaps others, we better get our own deterrent as well. In other words, more nuclear weapons, a more dangerous world, not the kind of place that I think we ought to be taking this country, or for that matter, the free world more generally.
Frank, we appreciate you taking the time today, and as we mentioned, we've talked a lot about this, lots of different opinions, and we welcome them all. Frank Gaffney, thank you so much.